Hi, my name is Matthew Tompkins and this is a tutorial for the Creative Cow. Hi, this time I wanted to look at the loop expression within After Effects. I've seen it featured in a few tutorials recently, but I wanted to look at some of its other functions. So what I've got here, I've just got a basic room set up with a ball being bounced against a wall and then rebounding off it with a bit of spin by the looks of it. If I look at the composition, I've got a few layers here, a couple of lights, a ceiling, floor, and my walls. But what I want to do is I just want to concentrate on this ball here. Now I've got 3 keyframes, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off just by repeating this this animation. So what I'll do is I'll hold down the Alt or Option key on the Mac and click the stopwatch here. And I'm going to type in loop out, that's loop with a lowercase l, and out with an uppercase O. And I'm going to open brackets, open quotation marks, and I'm just going to type in here cycle, in lowercase, and close my quotation marks, close brackets. Now I just need to click outside of this expression window here, or alternatively I can click the Enter key on the numerical keypad, and that will now enable our expression. So if I do a run preview now, we can see that we come through the keyframes I initially set, and as we pass beyond them we see that now we are looping these 3 keyframes. Now we'll continue doing this throughout the duration of the composition, or indeed the duration of the actual clip I've placed the expression on. As you can see here, that's nicely looping over and over. Now the reason it's called loop out is because the loop actually starts or begins at the first keyframe here, at this one. So if I drag these keyframes, I'm just going to highlight them all, and if I bring these to 3 seconds, you'll notice that there's no animation occurring, but once we hit 3 seconds, our animation begins and it will continue throughout the duration. The alternative to that, instead of out, I could change this to in. That's the uppercase I for in. And now what we see, if I do a run preview, we can see that the animation has begun, whereas with the loop out it didn't start until it reached the keyframes. Whereas here, the loop in function means that when our last keyframe is reached, the animation will stop. So we loop, then the animation stops. Take a longer look there. You can see after it reaches this keyframe, it's no longer cycling through them until we begin again. So that's the cycle and the loop in and out differences. So if I type in here ping pong, what we'll now notice, if I do a run preview, is that we run through the 3 keyframes as normal, but once it reaches the last keyframe, it will then come backwards in time to the first keyframe, and then it will ping pong from the first to the last. You can see that that's ping ponging in and out there. Now again, this will work exactly the same as a loop out. Just bring these keyframes to the start. Do a run preview. There we can see that we're ping-ponging backwards and forwards through the set keyframes, and again this will continue throughout the duration of the comp. Now what I could also do, if I come in here and I click just after the quotation mark but before the bracket, I can then enter a comma Then I can enter another value, and the value I enter here is referring to the keyframe. So if I set this to 1, I'll see when I do a run preview here. So we'll run through these first 3 initial keyframes, and then what we'll notice is that after the keyframes, what we're getting is that we're just repeating or looping or cycling through, or indeed ping-ponging through these last 2 keyframes. And say this will then continue on. Now the number we enter here depends on how many keyframes we have in our animation. So if I set this to 2, we can see that we're now actually cycling through all of these keyframes again, as though I hadn't even entered a number here. So with animations with perhaps a few more keyframes, if I came in here, say, and if I animated this ball, just take the position here, just bring that down a little. See, I've added another keyframe here. Now animation, what we see here is that ball kind of glides in the air there. We'll see that we're now going to these 2 keyframes here. So that gives you an idea of what happens when you enter an alternate value there. And that's exactly the same for cycle. So say if I come in here and type in cycle, do a run preview. What you'll notice now is that the animation is cycling from this keyframe, but playing forwards. And instead of coming back to the, in this case, the 3rd keyframe, we're starting from this one, which it's referring to as the 2nd. Now there is also a 3rd function of the loop out command. I'll just take a look at that now. I've got a red solid here. Let me just maybe scale this down a little. Okay, we have something like that. Go down a little further. Okay. Now here what I've set is a couple of keyframes. I've animated it across the Z-axis, so we're moving into the screen along the Z-axis. And if I Alt click or Option click on the Mac, this stopwatch again, and I type in loop out, open brackets, open quotation marks, and this time I'm going to type in continue in lowercase, and then close my quotation marks again, close my brackets. And now what happens is, if I do a run preview, we can see that red solid is progressively disappearing, going away from us in the Z-axis. So it's following the same trajectory we set here with this keyframe, and also the same velocity. As we notice here, it will continue going on in that direction at that set velocity. If I scroll along here through the duration, we can see it finally disappearing when we get to around 40 seconds or so. Again, that's a really useful way of just setting a couple of keyframes and leaving it to run. So again, if I come here, there's one little bit we can add to our expression here. After the loop out, we can also add duration, and that's with a uppercase D. Say we have here duration cycle, and this time the 2, instead of standing for keyframes, now stands for seconds. So if I do a run preview, We can see that we come through the animation first time, and everything is normal. And this second time, everything also seems to be the same. Now if I change this duration maybe to 1 second, you can see we run through these keyframes on the first pass. That's all fine. And then what we notice is that our animation now is starting after 1 second. So this mark here. Now again, if I change this to ping pong, I do a run preview, you can see we come through these first set 4 keyframes. What we notice is it plays back once it reaches the 1 second mark. After it's concluded its first pass, we'll see that it will just literally loop between those 1 second points. So now if I change this perhaps to 1.5 seconds, 1.5, and I do a run preview again, you see it almost gets to the end of the cycle of these keyframes as it ping-pongs back, but after 1.5 seconds of that, it then retreats and goes back in the opposite direction. So with these expressions, we can find our animations can take on another degree of complexity after just spending a little time just setting them up. So you can see something here, I've just duplicated the layout. As you can see here, we've already got a relatively complex looking animation that's just been established with a couple of layers and a few keyframes and an expression. Okay, my name is Matthew Tompkins. Thanks again for watching.